items. With regard to the March 22nd meeting minutes, any changes, corrections, additions?
I'll move that the March 22nd minute be approved.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Vince. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And let's talk about the construction services contract for bus stop construction. Al?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, board members. Al Burns, Director of Procurement. Before we go into the action item, I want to introduce you to someone that you might not be as familiar with, Mr. Mark Knight. He's the project manager over the over this contract that we have here. Also, to your right is Miss Angelique Baker.
Good morning.
Aye.
She's part of the procurement team and was instrumental in the success of this project. So I just want to make sure that I acknowledge staff and the hard work that they've done.
Great.
This morning I bring before you the action item, recommend approval of a 2-year base contract with JAM 520 Incorporated, Design Build Engineers and Contractors Incorporated, and American Construction Services, plus 3 1-year options for the installation of ADA boarding and shelter pads, as well as the installation of bus shelters for a total not to exceed $1 million, and recommend approval to authorize the CEO to exercise the 3 1-year options. For the background, I'm going to let Mr. Knight tell you a little bit of background on this contract.
Good morning. Again,
Good morning.
my name is Mark Knight. I'm the construction manager for PSTA. I'd like to talk to you about the ADA boarding and shelter pads and miscellaneous services procurement this morning. Throughout the county, PSTA has 4,669 bus stops, which includes 2,246 ADA boarding pads, 534 shelters, and 679 PSTA benches. Just one of PSTA's goals is to provide quality bus stop amenities for our customers. That includes ADA boarding pads and shelter pads, as well as bus shelters. Included in this procurement that we're talking about are 14 standard applications for different site conditions which may occur out in the field. The first 10 conditions are ADA boarding pads, and they can be located either on the far side of an intersection, the near side, or mid-block. Other factors that affect these conditions are the elevations of the actual site that we're at, the location of the sidewalk or curb or no curb. The last 4 conditions are basically different sizes shelter pads for our shelters. As part of our ongoing shelter deployment plan, we would continue to install the different types of concrete pads throughout Pinellas County using our successful contractor. Now I'd like to hand it back to Al to talk about the procurement process.
Thank you, Mark. In January, we released an invitation for bid, soliciting bids from experienced, qualified, and capable contractors for this project. I have to tell you that competition is what procurement is all about, to make sure that we get the most, that we're good fiscal stewards. And on this project, we sent direct notices out to 85 contractors. I know that Ms. Baker and Mr. Knight, I want to thank them for their patience on this, because I know I was like, hey, let's call, let's meet, and we met with several small businesses in the community, etc. I'm pleased to let you know that we received 6 bids back on this project. We received bids back from JAM 520, which is a locally owned company, Design Build Engineers and Contractors Incorporated, which is a DBE or a small business, and that's huge because a lot of the some of the dollars that'll be spent on this program are FTA funds. Bandees Construction, which is also a locally construction company, Simco, American Construction Services, and Florida Safety Contractors. So once again, I want to thank staff for actually going out there and reaching out to the vendor community and getting bids back. As a result, the three lowest price responsive and responsible contractors were Jam 520 Incorporated, Design Build Engineers and Contractors Incorporated, and American Construction Services. Now, we elected to select three, and I'll let Mark elaborate on why we chose to pick three contractors.
Essentially, in choosing three contractors, it gives us, PSTA, the flexibility to have three of them in terms of if they're really busy and we have ADA pads that need to be installed, we go to the first contractor and they're busy, we can go to the second or third contractor. It just provides a lot of flexibility so we can make sure that our stops are installed in a timely manner.
Also, if you look at the amounts that were bid for the three lowest bidders, and we're asking for a contract amount of not to exceed $1 million, the reason for that, we want to make sure that we have the resources available if there's additional work that needs to happen. There's sometimes, I don't know the proper word, but there's sometimes turn-ins or turnout bays that we have to pour concrete for, and we can utilize this contract for that. The fiscal impact for this is coming from several sources, local funds and FTA. But all task orders will continue to be subject to available budget and be required to have board approval for amounts exceeding $100,000 as per current PSTA policy. The reason we put that language in there is to make sure we have the ability to exercise that if we need to, but Brad and Debbie are adamant about transparency, and that will allow the board to say, hey, this is kind of in line with our traditional, anything over $100,000 comes to you. So it would more than likely come to you in the form of an informational item. Once again, what I'm asking is recommend approval of a 2-year base contract with Jam 520 Incorporated, Design Build Engineers and Contractors Incorporated, and American Construction Services, plus 3 one-year options for the installation of ADA boarding and shelter pads, as well as the installation of bus shelters, for a total not to exceed $1 million, and recommend approval to authorize the CEO to exercise the 3 one-year options. If there's any questions, Mark and I would be happy to field them.
Okay, questions? Go ahead.
Yes, I have a
Commissioner.
question.
Hold on 1 second. Commissioner.
So this is a total of 1 million over 5 years then?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what are we actually contracting them to build? So are we having them build 14 shelters, or
No,
14 different types of conditions they may find?
We have essentially 10 different conditions, which are ADA landing pads.
Okay.
It's a 5x8 concrete pad that's the back of the sidewalk connector that leads to the actual sidewalk. And these provide ADA access for people getting on and off the bus. The 10 different conditions vary from site to site, and that can be because of the elevations of the actual site work. And that is one of the items that are included in this contract. The other are for 4 different shelter pads.
Okay.
We have 4x8 shelters, 3x12 shelters, 4x12 shelters, and 8x12 shelters. And each shelter pad is a different size. So this includes the concrete work for both the ADA and the shelter pads.
Okay, so it's 14 different types of things we might be asking them to build at
That's
some point,
correct.
depending on the location.
That's correct, sir.
Okay. How does one bid on something like this without knowing how many there's?
So that's an excellent question. And the answer to it is we put estimated quantities in there based on previous year's work. So it's not like they don't have any idea on how much we'll be doing in the course of 1 year.
So we gave them an idea, but they don't really know exactly which sites or locations. That's why they have.
That's correct.
Correct.
So yeah, because I was just wondering why there's such a discrepancy. We have 3 bidders that are, $1 million to $1.5 million plus, and 3 that are under significantly. And I wasn't sure if there was an explanation in their bids as to why they felt it was much more.
Well, the reason for that is because the market's saturated right now. There's a lot of construction on both sides of the bay, and supply and demand. So the companies that we're awarding to, they're smaller companies than Bandy's or Simcoe or Florida Safety. However, staff did go out and do a responsibility check. One of the incumbents from the previous contract is American Construction Services. Mark's worked with them. Jam 520, we've worked with them. And Design Build Engineers and Contractors Incorporated, I've worked with them at previous agencies doing the same type of work. So they're all reputable vendors. They're just smaller, they're able to sharpen their pencil a little bit more.
Okay, thank you.
But
Mr.
these,
Smith.
these numbers, just so I understand, this is like GM 520, 697, 999, 63 cents. That's the hypothetical that they turned in to the bid, given your estimated quantities. That's not necessarily how much we're gonna pay them.
That is absolutely correct. And I maybe Mark can elaborate, but for each site, I think we have specific engineering drawings specific for each site. So they'd be giving us pricing once they actually have their employees on the ground and they survey it, and then they'll turn it into Mark, and Mark will determine.
And their unit prices in the contract as well, so, they get paid for exactly what they put down on the ground. It won't be a lump sum. All their costs will be based off of unit prices.
How much concrete, rebar, et cetera.
Right.
Commissioner Bennett?
Do we know in advance where these pads and shelters are going to be installed?
No, that will vary. It depends on our needs. If we receive a request through our amenities committee, they approve it, then it comes to the PMO office, and then we go out and do a site investigation. We have drawings drawn up, and then we submit the drawings to the contractors to give us firm prices on.
Well, I kind of hate to make a negative comment, but I would like the motion to include that none of this new, more modern benches, shelters, pads be installed in any of the 7 cities and towns that are not paying their fair share to PSTA. So we would eliminate Treasure Island, which has 28 stops and 40-some hotels that are getting our services for about 1/3 the price that I'm paying in my town. So I'd like to eliminate putting stuff in their towns.
So I might be wrong on this, other than existing locations, other than existing locations in all those cities, we don't. I mean, there are some shelters that we have replaced old ones and put new PSTA shelters. I know in St. Pete Beach at our transfer location, but they would have to pay for it. And
Well,
then
I
that's what
agree,
happens.
but if we make that as part of the motion, we're sending, as PSTA, we're sending a statement to them. It's about time they stand up and start thinking about they owe us more than what they're paying. So I'm making a motion that we approve this.
That's an amendment.
I would think about,
Excuse me, you don't, is that your only other question? I wanna
Sure.
ask- Okay, let me put that on hold, go ahead.
yeah, and
Mr. Cox.
my concern would be if we're denying ADA facilities to, somebody's in a wheelchair or something like that, maybe an unsafe situation, that needs a landing pad. I would want that to be regardless.
Well, I don't disagree with you, but we've been stopping at those stops on Gulf Boulevard and Treasure Island for 25 years.
Mhm.
So I don't think we need to upgrade them tomorrow or next month or next year.
Mr. Cox, any other
That's all
questions?
I have.
Okay, are we, maybe this is not part of this, but are we in any kind of an order to add new pads, or are we just in the process of either repairing pads or putting new stops where we have a need?
Essentially, we're putting new stops where we have a need, and we're repairing old stops where you may have cracked concrete.
Right.
And cause an issue for a wheelchair, which you have to repair immediately.
Right, but are we in any kind of legal order to?
No. I mean, PSTA has an adopted shelter deployment deployment plan is based on ridership, you know, it meeting certain ridership thresholds, and so we've got a list of locations that we're working with the cities. It takes a while to get the permits and everything for shelters that have high ridership. And then all the time, as Mr. Bennett was, as cities come to us, cities or the county or businesses, and say, hey, we would like a shelter in front of your here, like in the city of St. Petersburg, you even got community development block grants, I believe, some funding, and they, down in their Skyway Marina District in the very southern end of the county, and they're paying for like a dozen shelters down there. FDOT projects, you know, road construction projects, sometimes move shelters and then a pad is acquired, you know. And it's, as Mr. Cox said, like often there won't be a connection between the sidewalk, there'll be grass to get onto the bus that a wheelchair, you know, can't do it.
Okay, all right. So percentage-wise, maybe you guys don't have that, but percentage-wise, how many of these are new pads and how many are rebuilds because of deterioration or something like that? Or I didn't even think of the fact that maybe a road would be moved or something like that, and we had to make a new one anyway. But, yeah.
What's your guess on that?
If I had to take a guess at it, new ones would be about, we put in about, say, 87% of them are new, and the rest are all rebuilds, where you go in and repair concrete.
Okay, all right. And the other thing is, and this, I ask this question every time, and every time Al's always got my answer, but what kind of recourse do we have if they put in faulty material, faulty concrete or whatever, and it deteriorates more than what the life expectancy would be, or, you know, or it's not correct?
Well, actually, that was a question that was asked by one of the vendors that we met with one-on-one, is what happens if we make a mistake? And the short answer is, you fix it. And PSTA does not incur any additional cost for that.
Okay, and that's built into the contract, but these guys are big enough that they're not gonna be out of business when we go back, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, and there's cracks or deterioration some other way. I'm not an expert in concrete, but you know, that kind of thing.
Contractually, there's warranty language that's in the contract, and I think, and Mark can speak to this better than I can, I think before they actually pour and actually start the whole process, I think there's some quality assurance program that the PMO office has.
Yeah, essentially, when they go out and they prep the site for the concrete work, and then we go out, we'll check the grades and make sure their forms are set right. And then they have a testing agency that come out and check the compaction of the soil, and also take a cylinder over the concrete to make sure that it meets the correct PSI. So we verify everything as the concrete work goes along.
Okay, all right. And so there's multiple formulas on percentages of different material ones in the truck?
Yes, sir.
And those are all spec'd out.
So that's all checked out, so that when that concrete goes down, it's gonna stay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, okay, so go ahead, Mr. Schulman again.
So how do we confirm that what they're asking us to pay per site is what they bid, right? So do we say this is site condition 3, and whatever they said their unit cost for site condition 3 is, that's what they wind up paying based on their bid?
That's correct.
You hit it right on that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Secondly, this is a split between Fed and federal and PSTA funds. Do we know what the split is?
Mostly federal. It'd be mostly federal funds. The local funds come in when we do any shelter match program where an individual area or municipality wants something a little bit different.
Okay.
We'll match it.
And this might be for Brad. When you mentioned that cities will approach us and say that they want a shelter and they'll pay for them. When they pay for them, does it go through a contract like this, or is that a separate item?
Right, so,
That'll be contract.
if it needs concrete work, it would go through these, or we offer to the city, that we'll put the shelter in, at their, sometimes they request a special kind of looking shelter, but the pad usually is fairly standard.
So-
And we do that work.
So to Commissioner
Through these
Bennett's
times.
point, though, if Treasure Island came to us and said they wanted us to build shelter and a pad and whatnot in Treasure Island, and they were gonna pay for it, if we amended this motion based on his request, we would not be able to use this contract potentially to do
Yeah,
that.
I think we need to check with Alan to include this, or to not.
Well, I mean,
To include that amendment, I mean, that's a significant amendment. And that's,
yeah,
it got political and other ramifications.
if I can maybe just speak to that.
Yeah.
First of all, to Commissioner Schulman and Mr. Cox's point, when this is just the concrete, and it is mostly related to making sure that all our bus stops are accessible, for everybody to use them. Second, and I appreciate Mr. Bennett's point about the non-member cities. However, PSTA has for a very long time tried to play hardball with these cities, and it's just my recommendation. The committee can do whatever it wants, and the board can do whatever it wants. It would be my recommendation that we do not take that approach. We've had a number of meetings with the city of St. Pete Beach. They are very concerned about how they're perceived by the rest of the community as not, and they're just very worried about it. They have a brand new city manager down there that has been very, very positive, working with me and Abhishek on the bus rapid transit project, on their trolley service. Remember, they and Treasure Island vote every single year on their city council to pay us $500,000 for their support of public transit. So I understand that maybe that's not enough, that's not proportionate, but it would just be my recommendation that we take a different approach with them rather than sort of like playing hardball. But it's really up to you.
Well, I guess I agree with that, but we've kind of not played hardball for the past 10 or 12 years. So now it's time to do something. And I'm on the board now, a relatively new member, and so I will not let this go. My town would like to vote to pay half what we're paying, and that's what Treasure Island is paying, half what I'm paying. And I went to the Big C meeting last month, and the cities that are there at the Big C meeting are all critical of these towns for not paying their fair share. So something's going to happen, and PSTA should be at the forefront of that. Our county commissioners that are on our board should step up and say, if you don't do something, we're going to put a reformation out there that demands that everybody pay the same amount. And that would win easily. 90% of the people are paying their fair share. It's this 10% that's not.
Go ahead, Commissioner Cox.
I get your point, Rich. I mean, I truly do, but I don't know if this is like Mr. Miller said too, the item to pick to kind of draw a line in the sand, because this is like a safety issue. It's not an amenity. It's safety. So
Well, I think we could separate from that. But I think we should say something. Putting shelters up is not a safety issue. And I guarantee you, when these gentlemen are finished with their spending their $1 million, Treasure Island's 28 stops will have 10 or 12 shelters. I don't want to do that.
None of this $1 million goes to putting up any shelters anywhere in Pinellas County. It goes to the concrete under.
for the Americans with disabilities. It's for.
And lots of places where there's no shelter at all, it's just it's basically a sidewalk. or ramp.
I heard that word. That word came from these two gentlemen. We are going to build 88 shelters and pads. They said that 15 minutes ago. So let them tell me there's no shelters going to be built, and then I would agree. They said shelters and pads, that's why I brought it up. I wrote it down here.
Right, yeah. Well, I mean, yes, we are building shelters and pads,
Well,
but
you
this
just
is
said
the
we weren't
pad.
building shelters.
I'm saying this contract that is being recommended is for the pads. The city of Treasure Island would have to still pay for another $10,000 or whatever it costs for the shelter. For the shelter. That's all I'm saying.
Commissioners? So, you done?
I guess I'm done, but
Yeah.
I'd kind of like to hear it from the people who are
Right.
putting forth the contract, that there's no shelters included in the contract. Because they said, originally, they said there were shelters.
So I'd like to make a clarification. We have a contract for the purchase of shelters. And the purchase of shelters contract is with a company called Brasco. So that's a vehicle that we use to purchase the shelters. This contract right here, and I apologize for not writing the action item clear enough. This contract right here is for the installation, and installation only. I don't know if that makes things a
Or
little.
how, they're like the shelters we see out here.
Yes.
Okay.
But those are procured under a contract with a company named Brasco out of Michigan.
Okay. Commissioner Schulman?
I just want to say, I think it's important that we are making sure that our bus stop locations are safe and accessible. That is a primary concern. While I wholeheartedly agree with the sentiment, I don't think putting a population that is already dealing with accessibility issues, putting that population at risk furthers our cause. So I would like to move that we proceed with the action item as stated.
Okay, that's your motion?
That's my motion.
And I would second
Okay. All right. All right, all in favor of the motion as recommended by Commissioner Schulman?
that.
Aye.
And I oppose.
Okay, 3-1. All right, thank you for your comments, and there, we will address the issues that you're talking about, Commissioner Bennett. But to put a disabled person at risk
Well, I
is not
agree,
part of this.
Chairman, I don't disagree with that at all, but those several hundred or even thousand of people walking out of the hotels in Treasure Island are not disabled.
Right, okay. Okay, all right, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you,
Sorry
Mr. Chairman.
for taking so much of your time, but we do appreciate it. And I just want to say thank you very much to both of you for doing a lot, and also all your staff for doing a lot of legwork on this, because this is important, and those concrete pads are going to be there a long time, so we want to make sure that they're done in the correct fashion with correct material and all those other issues as well. So thank you very much to everyone who participated in this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Recommend that for the consent agenda?
Yes, I think so. Thank you. Okay. So next would be, we're going to the reports now. Debbie, with monthly financial statement, how are we looking?
We're looking fairly decently partway through the year here. We took a look at the month of February, and I'm very proud of my team. They've actually gone through and completed the month of March already. We didn't have it for this meeting. But if we take a look at the month of February, we had an anticipated deficit of 1.8 million, and we came in at $1 million for a $791,000 positive variance to budget. As you can see in the revenue side, we're $352,000 positive to budget. That is purely a timing of the property tax, and we'll see a little bit better how that works out on the year-to-date when we get to that. On the expense side, we are under budget in most categories. Staff is working very hard to contain expenses in light of our current deficit. One of the areas that's over budget is salaries. You can see fringes is under a little bit. It's one of the areas that Brad has us really looking at. Our operator overtime is up. During the month of February, we were actually 2 additional by the end of the month. We had 2 additional operators than what was budgeted. We've been trying to work to get, number one, what's the sweet spot for operators? The other thing is, our operators, the needs for it changes with every service change. So in the springtime, we need more operators or more overtime because of spring break. So we have a nice little task force going to kind of keep working on this, to hone this down, so as we prepare next year's budget, we can be a little bit better at what we need and when, and exactly how many operators that we will need. So that's an area of focus for us. One of the other areas that we've talked about, if you look down the page, is on DART. DART is an area that we are focusing on through the audit this year. And I have a saying that I keep up in my office, that what gets talked about, looked at, disagreed about, et cetera, gets better. So we're seeing that DART is a little bit under budget, and again, we formed a task force to look at that. We're actually looking at some data analytics tools to be able to help us be a little bit better at looking at the program and what the expenses are coming in to ensure their accuracy. So all of this is helping us to be under budget for the month. If we take a look at the year-to-date, which is the next page on this, on the year-to-date basis, we have a budgeted surplus of $26.3 million at this point in the year, with a actual of 27.4. You can see on the revenue side, we're about spot on. We sometimes have fluctuations in the property tax revenue from month to month, but you can see we're spot on with that. With the expenses, we are under budget year to date. So we hope to be able to continue this to some extent. Included in here are some one-time positive variances, such as we were able to move some expenses from services for that bus that was hit and severely damaged out of operations into capital. So that's been helpful on the operations side. So are there any questions related to this?
Okay, questions?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Schulman?
Is there a reason why the purchase transportation is so, the different variations of it, so significantly under budget?
I think DART is under budget because we've been paying a lot of attention to it this year and really diving into that, and we're going to be taking a look at, I think, some best practices next year as well as the data mining on that. Our TD expense is under budget as well. The one area that is over budget that we are also taking a deeper dive into is on the trolley side. So the Jolly Trolley currently is over budget slightly, and we are taking a look at that as well to ensure that we're being billed accurately and that we both understand the contract with the same language, same understanding of it.
So the Direct Connect though is,
And Direct Connect is also under budget.
is that lack of usage? I mean, is the ridership there changing dynamically, or?
Well, I would say the ridership is not changing dynamically on the Direct Connect program. It's relatively flat. Use, and remember, that's our first mile, last mile program with Uber and the taxi. And it's holding steady. It's below what we had budgeted. We kind of had, we expanded it substantially toward the end of last year, and so we kind of budgeted conservatively. Same thing with DART. We budgeted that conservatively, assuming the same trend that we were seeing. Now, as you can see by the ridership on DART, it's a little bit below, not much below, but it's a little bit below, down from a year ago, I think. Is it down?
It is just my, 500 trips.
Oh, yeah. So it's about steady with the high ridership of last year. We just budgeted a much higher number. So as Debbie said, we're below budget. We're about the same expenses that we spent last year too.
So this is not a change in ridership. It is, we forecasted a higher usage. We're not seeing that higher usage,
Right.
so we're under that budgeted number.
Right.
Yeah.
Also on the Direct Connect, Uber has a tendency to invoice us once every blue moon. So when we're basing budgets, we're basing things off of our accruals in the accounting world based on what we had seen. We were budgeting, and I'll look to Julie, was it $14,000 a month? And it actually, when we got the bills in, it came in significantly under. Again, that's based off of what we were seeing previously, which may have been just an uptick. when we don't get bills on a regular basis, it's hard for us to judge.
Do we have the option to pay those in once in a blue moon?
That it?
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Cox, Butch? No? Commissioner Bennett? Debbie, with regard to the DART program, some of that was caused by other agencies basically saying call DART as opposed to other vehicles that they have. Have we done anything to kind of get that more in line with the correct rules?
We're working really hard on that. We have done some outreach to some of the larger assisted living facilities and folks that have a lot of ridership and working with our contractor to have them carry more than one person if they're going to the same destination. Try to get them to use our new mobility programs of cabs and Lyft rather than that sort of thing. So I think that's had a positive effect. The longer term thing, I think what you're mainly referring to is the issue with Medicaid and the Medicaid sort of sending trips our way. Most of the hope on mitigating that is with the legislature passing a bill which I believe is moving forward pretty nicely. Last I saw that would allow Uber and Lyft to take Medicaid trips. That'll just expand make it easier for Medicaid recipients, we hope, to get a ride in another way other than DART, basically. And so that's a positive. And then we're actively working with Care Ride. And as Debbie said, some outside folks helping us to see what we can do, what we are allowed to do and what we can do to, if folks are signing up and they can get their ride some other way, especially if it's free to them rather than $4.50, to make sure they know that and work with the customers on that. So we're looking at every option on DART. I'm hopeful that we'll find some innovative solutions to kind of mitigate those costs moving forward.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, and to kind of, maybe this will clarify it a little bit too, when Care Ride had the wheelchair contract
Right.
initially, and then Yellow Cab had the
Right.
ambulatory. Care Ride took over the ambulatory 3 years ago, I think it was, something to that effect. And the ride started at like 400 a day. But word got out that, wait, these people are picking up on time, and ridership and enrollment grew, and now that's essentially doubled. It's like 800 a day, and the wheelchair part of it has remained static. That's right around 600, somewhere in that vicinity, 500 to 600. So, like Mr. Miller said, we were at the legislature a couple, 3 weeks ago, and they're moving forward. It's House Bill 411, in which when Senator Brandes sponsored it, and it's got a Democrat, Flores, I think it was, I can't remember, on the House side, and it looks like it'll pass. Now, it won't naturally initiate tomorrow if it passes today. Get a work contracts with the vendors and so on and so forth. But it's arrayable anyway, too. That people that have Medicaid and deserve good transportation can get it at no charge, or Uber would bill the state for it. So I mean, it's positive.
Yeah, my understanding is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the new Medicaid contracts have a built-in feature that they can get rights to medical.
Medicaid does have that, but the provider, it's not happening. It hadn't happened for years.
Okay, so that's why they're coming to us.
That's exactly
Yeah.
right. They need dependability because these are life-saving appointments they go to. Many times cancer, dialysis, so on and so forth.
Right.
But at least, it's being addressed, and I feel good.
Okay, good. it's up to date.
I want
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that explanation. How about the contracts issues?
All right, we've got a report in there that we have, and these contract dollar amounts are based on the length of the contract. So if it's a 3-year plus 2 1-year options, or 2-year plus 3 1-year options, it's the full 5 years, as you can see. Our most expensive one is Care Ride. So,
This is really small on our screens.
oh,
You can make it big.
You
Yeah.
can, you can zoom in.
Yeah, but then I can't see the whole thing at one time.
Very good.
I'll have to make that a little bit bigger. Yeah, our next one that we talk about quite a bit is Jolly Trolley. So you can see we put emphasis, different points on these large volume contracts. And not all these contracts is, you know, what we pay out, as we talked about this morning, but at least gives us a not to exceed amount that's on here. It gives you an order of magnitude, and we have it in descending order on here for all the contracts that we have in place.
Let's see. Where is, Cigna?
That's what I was looking.
I don't know why Cigna's not on
That should be on there for about 7 million.
Debbie, the reason this thing is not on is because because it didn't, these are all the things that we procure. It's Cigna's procured through the broker.
Okay, it should still be on here. It's not-
Okay.
Okay. Al's just, I think, telling us we had our broker help do the solicitation. So we kept it off and left that as an agreement, not a contract, but it is a contract.
there. Yeah.
And it has been on this report in the past.
It has.
It was on there.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go
Um,
ahead.
And I've mentioned this before, at least for me, it would be helpful to, it probably would be helpful for the chair to add an additional column, and make everything just a little bit smaller. But if we could get a per year contract, I realize this
That's
is.
difficult. Yeah, I think, isn't it? It's per year, because the contract is based on what you approve at the board level, not on a per year basis.
Well, some of these, like the buses, Gillig,
Mhm.
that's a one-time thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, there's,
Yeah, we did
some
go
of
back.
some of them are not per year.
Can we use like an accrual-based accounting methodology and just say, well, we expect to accrue an expense, and just so we can get a comparative, because, right, Care Ride, I mean, if we had a 20-year contract in here with someone, it could be $100 million, but it doesn't really, it might only be, you know, $4 million a year.
We can give, how about we put an estimate column on the ones that we know are 5-year and divide it by 5?
Right, just so we can quickly assess,
Yeah,
you know,
because I went back and looked. yeah.
what the impact of each one of these contracts is in the year that we're in,
So
or
we'll do an
over
estimated
time.
annual amount.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else have a question? I'm more interested in two things. One is the, you know, our relationship with Jolly Trolley, how that's showing in here. And the second thing is, we have 2 Gillig purchases, and a little farther down, we've got Gillig on a BYB purchase that I'm not exactly sure how that fits in there. Could we just talk for a second about what each of these items, that's items 4 and 5, and I can't count, maybe 10, the Gillig issues, where we stand with that, because I want to understand how many buses we're getting at what point.
From a contractual, I could speak from a contractual perspective.
Okay?
The 2 Gillig contracts, those were from the previous, they were from the last Florida Consortium bus buy.
Okay.
And that contract has not been officially closed yet. And it probably won't be officially closed until the new contract is put in place. So once the new contract is put in place, then we'll drop, then those, I intended to drop those from our system.
Okay, but what I'm really asking is, when are we getting these buses, and how many buses are we getting in each of these?
Well, you see on there, in the contract description, Gillig FY19 bus buy,
Yep,
and then the one below is FY17.
17, yeah. Okay.
So I'm not sure, I think that is when we, those years are when we purchased them, or.
But delivery is always delayed
It's
substantially.
like about a year later.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, we just got in the ones we purchased last, the board approved last year.
Mhm.
Here's the man with the answers.
Okay, all right, here he is.
Good morning.
How are you?
What would a meeting be?
We got,
Exactly.
Henry, you gotta have a permanent seat at the table.
He does.
Okay, so to answer your questions, contract ending in 004 with Gillig was the 2019 buses. There were 9. Those have been received, and they're actually out on the road today.
Okay,
056 was what we call the 2018 buses. There were 9. Those were received, delivered earlier this year. Those are on the road.
okay. And how about,
I believe.
054 or BYD? We only got 2 of those, right?
Right, 054, two all-electric buses plus charging equipment. Those buses were received back in August. They've been on the road, doing well.
They're doing the circular.
Downtown circular.
Okay, and what is the Gillig 058
Right.
that is bus by or hybrids from BAE? And
Right,
that-
058 was the 2017 buses. There were 3. So those have been on the road for about 2 years.
Okay, all right, they're rolling, okay, all right. What routes are they on?
All over the place.
They're all over the place.
Okay,
They're
they're not doing the long routes, they're still doing the shorter routes?
No, they're doing longer routes. Those are our series electric
Uh-huh.
hybrid buses.
Yeah, okay.
And
All
the
right.
fact that it says BAE on there was because weren't those the first ones that we got the BAE transmissions on?
Yes, they were.
Okay, all right, fine.
May I ask one question?
Sure, go ahead.
The 2019, when will the Wi-Fi come
That was wrapped up last week. About that.
When will the what? What was it?
on? Wi-Fi.
This man works on the bus.
Well, I'm right on it.
The 18s, the 19s, the cutaways, Jews, and I believe the 2 electric buses got all of them.
All right, good.
Okay.
Too good a minute.
Yeah. Okay, all right.
Could I have one question, please?
Yes, Commissioner Bennett.
I noticed this week, it made the headlines in the newspaper that Clearwater was thinking about driverless buses from downtown Clearwater to the beach. Do we have any involvement in that?
We do.
Because when I read the article, it looked like Clearwater was doing this all by themselves with no help, paying for it all and everything, and I knew that wasn't correct. So I thought I would just ask the question.
You're very astute. But we are very humble servants, and we love to spread the glory to our city partners. That article was triggered by a PSTA grant application to the federal government that we don't know if we're going to get. We're very hopeful. Federal U.S. Department of Transportation has issued a grant opportunity, $60 million nationwide, which isn't very much when you spread it across the country. So it's going to be very competitive, and we're the applicant. And then we were asking the city of Clearwater for a letter of support, and then that's what that article was about. They voted unanimously in support of it.
So if those 2 or 3 buses that they might or might not get, the funds for those would come from a federal grant plus
Yes.
PSTA?
I
Or would it all be a federal grant?
don't know, Cassandra, do you know?
I believe there's a small match, but we already have that within our budget.
Well, I understand that, I just want to cross out the word Clearwater and put PSTA in that article.
Appreciate your loyalty. Thank
follow up.
Okay, yes.
So actually, to follow up with these, I realized it was just a grant application, but are these expected to then be PSTA vehicles? With
No.
PSTA logo and?
I'm sure there'll be a PSA logo on them. It's my understanding that the plan is that we would lease the vehicles from, we would not own them. At least in this pilot mode with autonomous vehicles, that seems to have been, I don't even know if it might even be a requirement that, that these manufacturers of the vehicles own them and operate them, and they have to get their whole program certified by the feds. It's part of like a whole safety initiative that the federal government's putting on these autonomous vehicle pilots right now.
But to Commissioner Bennett's point, and something I've shared with you personally, is I just want to make sure that our citizens in North County, I appreciate being humble, but our citizens in North County need to know the services that PSTA are providing, and all they see are buses. And so when they don't see buses, the traditional buses going down the road, they feel like they're not getting any services. And whether it's Care Ride or autonomous vehicles or other things that are happening that PSTA has a part, we can be humble and yet still remind people that we're involved in the process. We're using our funds. It's part of their money as a citizen that's helped putting those things on. And that's an important part of engaging in North County.
Agreed.
Okay. All right. Anything else in the contracts area that people have questions about? Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, ridership and performance. Brad?
Is that your places? Actually, I would characterize March 2019 as a pretty solid month for ridership, even though it did show a slight decrease in the bus ridership. That was entirely due to the fact that there was one fewer weekday this March than last March, and year to date we are up slightly in overall ridership, just barely. So we're kind of basically flat overall.
Questions? It's probably too soon to tell, but on the basis of our relationship with other similar bus groups through APTA and so on, do we know whether that's a trend nationally? Have things kind of bottomed out as far as bus route decline?
We're waiting on the next year's benchmarking report that I can give you a more backed up answer. I would say that the overall sort of anecdotal view is that it's a mixed bag right now. I mean, some transit systems are still declining, especially on the bus side. A number of transit systems have modified their services to be more higher frequency, to have more frequent service, and those there's a number of systems like that that are seeing ridership increases that have done that. So I would, there's lots of different factors. It's I would say it's no longer 100% of the systems that are seeing ridership decline, like it was maybe even a year ago.
All right, yeah, we need to keep on top of that, because obviously that's going to make a big impact with us when we present our ideas to the Pinellas riders and Pinellas voters. So down the line, if we decide to do some kind of an improvement in our ridership services, then we need to have that data available. Okay, any other future meeting subjects that we need to know about?
I don't think so.
Okay. Any other business?
Well, I'd just like to make one comment, if I
Sure.
could, Mr.
Absolutely.
Chairman. I think that, to me, what we have done today is good, but we haven't officially said that the Finance Committee recommends that we pursue this $4 or $5 million that we're not collecting. It just happens to coincide with our potential deficit spending over the next couple of years.
Okay. All right. Any other comments? Okay. I'll say that our meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Good.
All right, 35 minutes.